There's the holy sound. Cool. So in Great Western Trail, you are trying to be the most successful cattle driver possible, and you will score victory points through this many different means. There are lots of different ways to score victory points. But that's good, because it means whatever you do, you're going to get some victory points out of it. Okay? So there's all sorts of stuff going on your board and all that jazz, but let's just leave that for a moment and let's talk about a normal turn. So on a normal turn, there's 3 stages to your turn. First of all, you will move your cattleman, and in a 3-player game, as this tells you down here, you can move 3 spaces. Okay. Now, in this game, a space is any place on the board that actually has something in it. So that is 1 space. This isn't 1, 2, 3. 3 could be 1, 2, 3. You could be all the way there. Okay. Likewise, if you were crazy, you could go 1, 2, 3, because this reflects obstacles taking this route. So this route is obviously much nicer. Okay. Now you will move 3 spaces, and don't think of it as Monopoly, where you're going 1, 2, 3. You're essentially stepping everywhere you go. And why that's important is because certain tiles, for instance hazards, or some of your personal buildings, feature green and black hands, and these reflect costs and trials to get through. Now these lovely grey buildings are nice and neutral, and they don't make any demands of you. They're very undemanding. But the Indian teepees, or Native American teepees, rock slides, floods, deserts, of which there aren't on at the moment, all of these are obstacles that will cost you money to get through. Now you can see on your board here it tells you each green hand is -2 money and each black hand is -1 money. So if you decide to go this route, you'll pay nothing. That sounds good. If you go this way, it will take you longer and you will have to spend 2 money here, 1 money here for 3 money. So don't go that way. Why would you ever go another way? Well, we'll find out. So you do your move, and where you end your movement relates to the action you can do. Okay? If you end your movement on a neutral building or a building controlled by yourself, you can do that building's action. Okay? Or if you land on a building controlled by another player, or on a hazard, or your own building or a neutral building, you can always do an auxiliary action, which are listed over here. Okay, now at the start of the game, you only have 2 auxiliary actions. You can either gain a money, or this symbol. Green is always good, red is almost always bad. This means draw a card from your cattle deck, and then discard a card. And we'll see why that's important later. Now, when you land on a building, most buildings have got 2 actions. You don't have to do them both, but you can do both the actions on that building, and they will often be very good. There's a lot of symbology in the game, but once you start to understand the fundamentals, it'll all actually make a lot of sense. So you don't have to move 3 spaces. So let's say you went 1, 2, okay? Then you would resolve the actions on there, or do an auxiliary action, because it's a neutral building. And then the final thing you do on your turn is you draw back up to your hand size. Now at the start of the game, you have a hand size of 4, and you will have 4 cow cards in your hand. If you've spent any cards for actions on buildings, you'll draw back up, and this is so important. And why is it so important? Because the whole goal of where we're going to get to is Kansas City, well, the railway station at Kansas City. Once you get there, after all these trials and tribulations, first of all, you have these 3, which are very unexciting at the moment, basically foretelling spaces. These foretell of new obstacles that will be coming, new people you can employ, things like that. On each space, you'll choose one of the 2 and you'll put it on its relevant spot. So a TP would go on the Native American conservation, and any workers will go into the job market. Now this is very, very boring at the start in this particular game, because do you want a green TP or a green TP? Do you want a railway engineer or a railway engineer? Do you want a craftsman or a craftsman? There's no decision. You move along, bum, bum, bum. Then you will reveal the hand of cows that you have. So, by just randomly drawing from my deck, if I'd got here and this was my hand, okay, I would reveal my hand. Now, the only thing that matters on the cows once you get to Kansas is the number, the value in the top corner. Now, unlike in a normal game where you would imagine this to just be like you add up the numbers, you only add up one of each type. So this second Guernsey does nothing for me because it doesn't reflect the actual number of cows you have, it's the variety of your stock. So here I would have 2, 4, 5. Okay. Now this also tells you that if you have any certificates which are on your board and you can earn some permanent certificates, you can also spend those because you're saying, oh my Guernsey's won first place in the Native American Indian prize or whatever, and you can increase the value by 1 for every certificate you spend, or permanent certificates, which we'll get into later. However much you get to your value, so let's say I had 2 certificates as well, and I decided to spend 1, that increases my value by 1, so now I have value 6. All right, I get that much money from the bank, and then I have to decide which city I'm going to deliver this beef to. Okay, now underneath all the cities is a value, and this is the minimum value that your herd needs to be worth to reach that city. So since I spent that extra point to get to 6, that means I can get to Colorado Springs. Now I can go to Colorado Springs, Wichita, Topeka, or Kansas City. Okay, now apart from Kansas and San Francisco, you can only go to each city once. And how you keep track of that is with these discs that are on your board. Okay, whenever you visit a city, you can choose one of the discs on your board, remove it, and place it on that city. So let's say I was going to Colorado Springs. So I've decided I'm going to take this disc off my board, and I put it there. Okay, now, you may have noticed these little trains at the top. These don't reflect your actual train travelling. They more reflect the extent of your railway network, the railway contacts that you have. Now, at the start, we all have no railway contacts. We're stuck in Kansas. You will have to pay 1 money for every one of these stop signs that you go past that is beyond your train. So if this was the first trip I've done, and I haven't moved my train, I'm going to have to pay 3 money to get to Colorado Springs. Now I'll always be able to afford that because I just earned 6 money on my from my cattle value. So that's going to eat into my profits. Now if my train was here, there's only 1 stop sign between me and my destination, so I would pay 1 money. So that's one of the reasons that moving your rail network forward is so important. Now, next to all the cities, there are these green arrows that point between 2 cities for most of the cities. If you have a disc, if you've visited both of these cities, you will get the reward or the penalty listed on them, because these early cities are rubbish. If you've been to Topeka and Wichita, you will lose 3 victory points, but gain an objective card, so it's not completely terrible. Now, as I said, you can only go to each one once, and that's really important because you will need to increase the value of your herd, because the only place you can go to more than once is San Francisco. If you aren't going there more than once, congratulations, you've probably won. And Kansas, which sort of sucks, because each time you go to Kansas, you lose 6 victory points, but you get 6 money, because you're not using any railways. So, now that's what happens when you get to Kansas. Now, of course, the journey along the way is how you will refine, because in my case, that Guernsey was a complete waste. If I'd had, very professionally done. If I'd had a Black Angus, that would have been 7, and if I'd spent that certificate, I could have got to 8 to get to Santa Fe. Okay? So, sort of culling your deck as you travel along is a really important part of the journey. Now, let's look at the buildings, because this is really like the meat of the game. Now, we've got our personal buildings, but let's look at the neutral buildings first of all, since we'll all be able to use those. So, the symbology here, that is a 2. If you've got a 2 white cow in your hand, which I believe is called a Guernsey, you can discard it for 2 money, which is brilliant, because you'll be cycling through your deck, getting to your better cows. Maybe you've got 2 Guernseys in hand, because you've got 3 Guernseys, 3 Black Angus, 3 Dutch belts, and 5 jerseys in your deck. Oh, awesome, going on fine. And then this indicates that you can do a hiring action, okay, from the job market. Now, the job market shows who's available for work. It shows when the cattle market will be refilled and when the game will end. This is the timer on the game. The game doesn't have a set number of turns. It will have a set number of visits to Kansas City. that dictates the end. Now, the cost to hire someone, here it says it will cost you minus nothing, so it will cost you exactly what it lists here. So you can only buy from a row where the job market counter isn't. So at the start of the game, only these 3 are available, and they will cost you 6 money to buy. Okay, you will take the person that you purchase and you'll put it on the next available space on the relevant row. We all count as having starting with 1 of them. And then the second action is you can buy another person, but for 2 more money, which isn't something that we found you do that often, because that is quite the financial penalty, but at the right time it's really important. What do all the people do, I hear you ask, Dan? Excellent question. So the Cowboys all relate to the cattle market in this version of the game, which we will get onto when we visit this building later. So we'll pause the Cowboys. The railway engineers relate to the expansion of your railway, and they relate to any time that you'll see this symbol, which means you will move your engine a number of spaces for each of your railway engineers. So the more railway engineers you have, the further along your train will be able to move when you visit these spaces. Okay? And the Craftsmen relate to building, which we're just about to get onto in a second. So I'll talk about that then. Now, in addition, you can see on every space of the railway engineer board there is something pictured, and when you place your employee on that space, you get that action. Now, the Cowboys and the Craftsmen only have a couple, but the railway engineers have one every single space. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so that's this space. Next one, discard a Dutch belt from your hand for 2 money, and then you can build 1 building, and it tells you that for every craftsman you use, it's going to cost you 2 money. These people aren't slaves, you have to pay them. So, that's painfully topical actually in an American game. Now, each of your buildings and your personal supply in the top left have the symbology of a craftsman, and that number is the number of craftsmen you must have in your employ to build that building. So at the beginning, we can only build buildings 1, 2, and 3. And for every builder you use, it's going to cost you 2 money. Now, in addition to building a building, you can also upgrade a building, because if you look all the way to the end of your line, 9, the most craftsmen we can have is 6. We can't have 9. How are we ever going to build that? You can upgrade an old building into a higher level building, and you pay the difference. So you could build the 5, and then later on upgrade it to the 9, and you'd pay for 4 workmen. Okay? We'll go through what all your own buildings do after we've done the neutral buildings. Next, we have this one. Now, this is an example of a slash, so you can choose this or this, and then you get that. This means you can move your certificate marker 1 space down, temporary certificate marker, which is really powerful because it increases the value of your cattle. I mean, this is so deceptively powerful because it seems like, well, it's just like 1 money, but the difference between being able to get here and having to go here is huge. And you can't always control what cards you have in your hand, but you can control your temporary marker. The other side of it means draw one of the objectives from the objective market. Now, each of these objective cards, when you gain them, they'll go into your discard pile. And when you draw them, you have 2 options. You can either not play them and discard them through some means, or if you play them, you get the action in the top left, which is great. All the actions are always good. But if you play it, it goes into your personal objective area, which at the moment, you've just got your starting objective in. Now, the starting objective is just friendly. It just will give you victory points if you fulfill the criteria. But the general objective cards, if you play them for the benefit, then at the end of the game, you are saying, I will fulfill this condition. And that means if you do it, you'll get the victory points. If you don't, you'll lose those victory points. Now, you don't have to play objective cards. You can just keep them cycling through your deck, but obviously then they're clogging up your deck if you're not using their effects. And at the end of the game, any objective card still in your deck, you can choose if you want to score. So careful with the objective cards. Oh, and for all the criteria on these, you can't double up. You've played Ticket to Ride? Right, so in Ticket to Ride, if I build a route from X to Y, and then I have another route that says from X to Z, I can share that route. You can't share objectives in this. So this means I've got to buy a 3 quality cow, a 4 quality cow, and build a building. This means I've got to build a building and get 2 blue wigwams. this one building can only count for one of those objectives. Okay. Then on the other side, as we talked about it before, you'll move your railway engine one space forward for each of your engineers. Amazing. So important. Right then, this one, you can either trade with the Native Americans. So if you trade with the Native Americans at the moment, that's rubbish. It basically means you can pick up any TP of your choice. And you will either gain or lose the money as depicted above. So at the moment, you would lose at best 1 money for trading with the Native Americans because there aren't many. Okay, as they fill up their conservation, they're more tempted to trade with you, and you can make a lot of money from doing it. Or you can spend 2 money to move your train forward 2 spaces. Okay. Then this symbol means you can take an auxiliary or a double auxiliary action. At the start of the game, as we mentioned, you've only got 2 auxiliary actions, but then if you unlock your discs, you can do a double auxiliary action. So instead of just gaining 1 money, I could gain 2 money. Instead of just drawing 1 card and discarding a card, I could draw 2 cards and discard 2. The double actions can be really powerful, and we'll go through your board later. Now, we talked about Cowboys earlier, and this is where they really come into their own. Discard a Black Angus for 2 money, and then go to the cattle market. Now, the cattle market is one of the weirder things to get your head around, in my opinion, at the start of the game, but once you start playing, it starts to make sense. For each cowboy you have, that can increase your purchasing options. So it says here, if you've got 1 cowboy, then you can purchase a blue, red, or yellow, basically 3 value cow for 6 money. Or you could purchase a 4 value brown cow for 12 money. Those are your options. If you've got 2 cowboys, you could do 1 and 1. Or you could do one of the 2 and take a 3 value cow for 3 money. Or buy a Texas Longhorn purple 5 value cow for 12 money. Oh, it's such a good cow. Now, in addition, you can also spend any number of cowboys you want to add 2 more cards to the cattle market to increase your options. When you buy a cow, it goes into your discard pile, a la your normal deck builder. As we talked about with the cows before, like in our starting decks, the value at the top, the number at the top is their value, which is what will be added when you do your trip to Kansas. The number in the shield is their victory points, which you will get at the end of the game, no matter what. So good cows are worth points, and that's how the cows work. That's how the cattle market works. And next building here. This means if you have 2 cows that are exactly the same type, you can discard them to gain 4 money. So good for all those rubbish Guernsey jerseys you've got in your deck. And then this symbol means you can clear one of the hazards, water, rocks, deserts, for 7 money. And then you keep that tile. And that might be because you're trying to free up a route, but also these are worth victory points at the end. And they relate to objectives. You've got one on your objective card. The last building, move your engine 1 space forward for engineer, and then take a single or double auxiliary action. And these are set in the learning game into these locations. But in a proper game, these would be mixed around. And the reason this one's here is so that you get that last chance before you get to Kansas to mess with your deck a little bit and to move your train on so that you don't pay an exorbitant amount. That's what all the neutral buildings do. Now, we talked about moving your train. Let's go back to your train just for a second so that we can close the door on trains. When the train moves, it moves from like the, whatever you call these things. Sleeper, thank you, as the audience is. From sleeper to sleeper. When you get hit to this location, you can either carry on moving forward or pull into the lay-by, or whatever, turnabout, whatever it's called in trains. And the only reason to do that is because these are stations. Okay, if you fulfill the requirement, so here, paying 2 money, you can put one of your discs into the station. And if you do that, if you're the first person to do that, then you can also, if you wish, take the Station Master tile, Station Master favour, but in order to do that, someone actually has to run the station. So you have to take one of your workers who you've employed and put them into the station. Now these tiles, so this means you'll get a victory point for having a station, and there are various objectives that relate to stations, and getting discs off your board is great because it frees up more available actions and more powerful actions. These Station Master favour tiles give you an immediate effect and an end of the game scoring effect. So this one means you've got 1 permanent certificate. So basically all your cattle is going to be worth 1 more. every time, which is amazing. And at the end of the game, for every 2 hazards you've done, you get 3 victory points. 2 money straight away. For every worker you have on your board, 1 victory point. Either remove a hazard for free or deal with the Indians for free. And then every 2 objectives you've got give you 3 victory points. One permanent certificate at the end of the game. Every 2 certificates you've got, whether they're permanent or whether they're temporary, gives you 3 victory points. 1 permanent certificate, and every set of 1 blue and 1 green TP gives you 3 victory points. Okay, so that's what the train's all about. And the reason that the train can go on either further is because there are other spaces that you can deposit your discs. We've talked a lot about discs. Let's look at the player boards and see what those discs are about. As you can see, you've actually got white spots and black spots. Now that is very important because there is a white disc can go anywhere, but a black backed disc can only go onto black backed locations, which are these 4 cities and all of these stations. Now, if we look at the white discs on your auxiliary action list, you can see you've already got 1 money and draw a card and discard a card, and then you can remove those discs to make them doubles, which is obviously good. And underneath, you have a variety of actions. The first one means spend a money, move your train backwards a space, and gain a certificate. Now, moving a train backwards can actually be useful, but it's a bit of a nuanced sort of thing. But certificates are always good. The next one is spend the money and move your train forward a space. And the last one is move your train backwards a space, choose a card in your hand, and remove it from the game. Okay, so that you can get rid of cards that you don't want. Although it's not as good as it is in normal deck builders because the rubbish cows have still got uses. So that's what all the actions do there. Now on the top of your board, you have these 2 spaces relate to movement. The first one that you do, but these are black spaces, so it's hard to free them up. The first one you remove will let you move 5 spaces when you move, which is staggeringly good and gives you 3 money when you unlock it. The one after that lets you move an additional space, but will also give you 3 victory points at the end. Across comes my personal favourite. When you remove that one, your hand size increases by 1, which is amazing because it will let you build up much higher value cattle and give you more options for using spaces, but it will cost you 5 money to unlock it. And the next one, same thing again. 5 money increases your hand size again. Down at the bottom, you've got your certificate on a white, which will let you have 4 temporary certificates. That's really, as far as I can see, a later game option. And then nobody unlocked the final black one, which lets you have 6 temporary certificates. So compared to the other black ones, it's nowhere near as good, in my opinion. That's your player board. We said we'd talk about these engineer actions. Why don't we talk about them now? The first engineer, discard a jersey from your hand, move your temporary certificate up a space. Next one, discard a jersey from your hand, gain 2 money. Next one, perform a higher worker action, paying 2 less than you normally would, even though it says +2, which is somewhat confusing. Discard a jersey, gain 2 temporary certificates. Discard a jersey, gain 4 money. And very, very, very cleverly, the railway engineers love being the station masters because when you remove them from your board, you can then buy another one and then do that action again because it will have revealed the space. Now, we should talk about the Craftsmen and the Cowboy actions. By now, hopefully the symbology is starting to make sense. The Cowboy, remove any hazard from the board for free. Cowboy, top trap, that one, yeah. And the last one, deal with the Indians for free. Deal with the Native Americans, Goramik. Craftsmen, when you cover up those particular spaces, you may immediately build a building and pay 1 money per craftsman, which can be an enormous saving. In addition, you can see at the top of your worker board the 4 victory points. Every worker that you get in one of those spaces will give you 4 points. So if you manage to fill all of those, congratulations, you just had 24 points for workers. That's your board. We're almost there now. Now we've got your personal buildings. Now these are double-sided, but we're using the learning game side, which is side A. Right, I'm going to do this without looking at the book because I know all of these. You ready? Guys, number 1. First of all, the most important thing about number 1, it has a green hand on it. So what I did first turn is I moved 2 spaces, went to the building location. You're right. All right, cool. Built that building there, and then everyone that came this way had to pay me 2 money. Yeah. Or they could go this way, take longer, and pay 3 money to the bank. No one did that until the very last turn of the game. I made a lot of money out of that building, let me tell you. Now, what it actually does, and only for the person that owns it when they land on it, not anybody else, is that every building that you have that is in the woods, you'll get 2 money. I never once used this building, but it was an amazing tax on everyone that walked past it. Next one, discard a Guernsey from your hand for 4 money and perform the cattle market action, which is just better than this one. Black Angus for 2, Guernsey for 4, and do the action. But note, no hand on it, so there's no cost for anyone to move past it. Next one, discard 2 cows that are the same, gain 3 money, and then move your cowboy 1 space. This is so good, because it doesn't mean move in 1 space, end your turn. It means move in 1 space, and if you land on a building you can use... no, when you land, have another go. So if you land on a build... I think I had this around here, and so I would be discarding 2 cows, gaining 3 money, moving on to here, gaining a certificate, moving my train on a number of spaces. You're essentially getting a double turn. I had the next building, remove a hazard for 5 money, then move your cowboy 2 spaces, and it has a black hand on it, which will cost 1 money. I had that up here, so I was both removing a hazard, getting the little bonus action, because you see all the locations that are placed after hazards give the owner bonus actions on that space, because they're harder to get to. So I was removing a hazard, I was discarding any cow that I wanted from my hand and gaining a certificate, then moving 2 spaces to go here, moving my train on several spaces and taking a double auxiliary action. Okay? So good! But how people can disrupt that is if Alec puts that here to go, ooh, I'll move on 1 space and I land here. But if I put one of my buildings there, ha 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 ha, now you're moving on to my space and you're getting not nearly as much. So the chain effects are amazing. So we've talked about building number 4. Building number 5 is perform a higher worker action, paying 1 less. Amazing. And move your engine a number of spaces equal to your railway engineers. Building 6, discard a Holstein cow from your hand and gain 10 money, and then a single or a double auxiliary action. And by the time you've built this, you must have at least one double action. Next one, for every set of 1 green and 1 blue TP you have, move your certificate 2 spaces and gain 2 money, and it is a green and a black hand, which means anyone that moves past it must pay 3 money to you. Next one, trade with the Native Americans for free. So I built this here and was basically going, I'll have 8 money. I'll have 6 money. Like, each journey back it was huge. Or take a single or a double auxiliary action and just move your train forward 2. And it's a green hand. Next one, move your train forward 3. Then you can move your train backwards and it lets you visit a city. Oh no, I don't know this one. Oh, I was doing really well. No one built this. This one. Oh, it's an extraordinary delivery. Right. First, move your engine backwards 1 or more spaces, then choose a city crest with a city value which is equal or lower than the number of spaces you just moved your engine backwards. You can't go somewhere you've already been. And then, following the usual rules, place one of your player discs from your player board onto the chosen city crests. So that means that you can... That's a very finesse sort of space, but it would let you cherry pick if you really need to move the black disc, you could. And the last building lets you, when you go there, fill your certificate to max and move your guy 5 spaces forward. And it's a black hand, and it's obviously worth 13 victory points. There's all the personal buildings. There's all the things. That's the whole game. Go on.
How do you track VP?
It's all done at the end.
How do you...
Because your disc will be there.
Okay.
Good question. And that's everything.